Hello and welcome to this overview of some of the features that Trigger has to offer. I won't be going into too much detail today as to how to set these features up because they're covered in my series of 2-minute tutorials. There's a link to this playlist on YouTube on my website, so please follow those if you wish to find out how to carry out or set up a specific feature. But we've got a small cue sheet set up here, and there are 3 layout styles that Trigger has to offer. They're standard layout, grid layout and freeform layout, and this project is an example of grid layout. So we've got 3 types of cue button on this grid cue sheet. There's an audio button such as this brown sugar button in the top left hand corner, and the type of each button is indicated by the type icon in the bottom right hand corner of each cue button. So this is an audio button. Over here on the right we've got a video button, and here in the yellow button we've got a trigger button. Trigger buttons offer a certain amount of additional control over audio and video buttons. So each button is in 2 sections. The left hand section is called the tag section, the right hand section is called the main section, and the tag section is essentially for controlling the setup of the button, and the main section is for controlling the playback of that button. So if we click on the tag section, you can see we can select a button. If we hold the control and shift keys, or control or shift keys on my keyboard, I can select multiple buttons in the usual way that you would expect for your operating system. If I right click on the tag section, I get a pop-up menu, and here I can change the display label. I can choose to add a pop-up note to the cue button. I could show a floating duration panel, or I could show a pop-up slider so I could adjust the volume or tempo or whatever in real time. The most important option here is button properties. So if I click on button properties, you'll see it opens up the button properties window, and I've got various tabs such as the cue control tab, which allows me to configure how this button is controlled or how it controls other buttons. The cue display tab, so I can change the color of the button, or I can change the label here as well. On the audio tab, I can select the actual audio output device that the audio is going to be routed to, the speed of playback, the tempo, the balance, the level, and I can configure a stop fade here as well. Various other parameters that I can set up here. But if I go to the loop and skip page, you'll see that I've set up a loop for this button and a trim in point fairly near the end of this track. If I zoom in on that, you can see the track will play from the trim in point into my loop zone that I've set up here. And because my loop count is set to -1, at the moment this will play infinitely. These yellow markers up here indicate that I've also set up jumps on this particular track, and that will allow me to perform musical coda tagging. But I'll explain how that's done in a minute. For now, I'll click done to that, and we'll move on to the main section. So by default, if I left click on the main section, it will play an audio button or fire a trigger button or a video button. Left clicking again will stop the button playing. I can also use the center mouse button and the right mouse button to control playback. By default, the center mouse button will pause a playing track, and the right mouse button will stop it, and I can then combine these 3 mouse buttons with my shift key on my keyboard to provide 3 more layers of control through my mouse. I can of course control buttons, cue buttons with a touch screen, or with an external controller, or with MIDI, or over a local area network using TCP/IP or UDP. So there are many ways that I can choose to control Trigger. So you can see on this button, as I just said earlier, I've got a trim in point set and a loop. So if we watch that play, we left click and it will play. I can move the button around while it's playing by dragging it on my cue sheet and just drag it to different positions on my cue sheet as I so desire. You can see it's entered the loop now, and when it gets to the loop out point, it will loop back like that. And it will keep doing that forever. But what if I want to be able to instruct it to exit the loop the next time round? Well, I can do that by adding a trigger button similar to the one I've already added to my project here. And I add a button to my cue sheet by right-clicking in an empty grid space and selecting Add Trigger Button in this instance. And I'll name the trigger button Now I want to set up a link so that when I fire this trigger button, it will cause this button to exit the loop. And the way I do that is I press Control on my keyboard and I drag from my trigger button onto my target button, and then I get this little pop-up dialog box on fire. When the trigger button is fired, I want it to exit the loop. So I create link. And now when I play this button through, it will play from my trim point as before. It will enter the loop at that point there. Now, normally it would just loop through, but if I now click on this trigger button, you'll see the loop symbol disappears and the track will now play through, ignoring the loop point, and play to the end of the track like that. But what if I want to end the music and have a little bit more accuracy over when I do that? Well, I could use musical coder tagging. So I can set up jumps, which I've already done in this instance. And I've set up this trigger button to execute a jump on this button when I click the trigger button here. So what will happen is when I play the brown sugar track, and then I fire, it will carry on playing through the loop until I click my trigger button, at which point it will play up to the next jump point that I've programmed in. So we'll just hear that in action now. So again, it plays through the intro into my loop, and now I'll hit the trigger button. So you saw there, it played through to the next jump point and then tagged the track. Okay, I now want to talk to you about trigger syncs. Now I've got a voiceover here and a Waterloo track, piece of music here. What I want to happen is when I play this voiceover at a certain point just before the voiceover ends, I want it to fire this music. So we'll look at the button properties for the voiceover. We'll open up the button properties form. First of all, you'll see on the reverb page, I've got a little bit of reverb added to make it sound a bit more lively. Then if I go to the trigger syncs tag, you'll see at just after 5 seconds into the voiceover, I've got a sync set up, and this sync is programmed to fire button 8 on this cue sheet, fire Waterloo, when that sync point is reached during playback. So we'll click done to that. And on the music side, we'll look at the Waterloo track and we'll look at the button properties for that. If we go to the envelopes page and zoom in on that, you can see that there's a short ramp in on the music, then it will play at a reduced level until the voiceover ends, and then it will swell up to full level. So we'll just hear the net result of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Mel Gedroich.
So you could hear all that happening now, and it'll be, now it's programmed in, it will happen absolutely consistently every time. And finally, I want to talk to you about video, because Trigger will play back video as well. Here we have a video button, and if I center click on the video button, it will open the video window with the video paused on the first frame in this instance. You can of course choose size your video window, so you could drag it onto another monitor, you could feed it to a projector, and you can size it accordingly also. You can choose to keep the video form open all the time if you so wish. And if I now center click again on the video form, on the Q button, you'll see it plays the video. And if I right click, it will stop it like that. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed watching today's video. We've literally just scratched the surface. This is a tiny fraction of the amount of features that Trigger has to offer, and they are covered in my 2-minute tutorial, so I hope you catch up with those sometime. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.